In 2013, a team at the University of Michigan found dimethyltryptamine in the pineal glands of living rats. DMT. The compound clinical pharmacologists have been calling the most powerful perceptual agent ever documented in a mammalian brain. It was being produced inside a gland smaller than a pea, tucked between the two hemispheres, and the paper couldn't explain why it was there. That got some press. Here's the part that got less. The same gland starts calcifying in most humans between the ages of 10 and 14. Calcium phosphate deposits, hard, visible on a CT scan. By adulthood, in certain populations, more than 60% of the gland eyesight, calcium. A structure that produces the most powerful perceptual compound ever measured in a living brain, and in most people, it's calcifying before they finish puberty. Not shrinking, not atrophying, turning white. 2,200 years ago, somebody described this. He described the gland's position. He described what it did. He described the moment it was shut down, and he named who gave the order. He wrote it in a chapter that most Bibles don't carry, and when the first English translators brought it across, they changed the language just enough that no one noticed what the verse was actually about. If this is the first time you found this channel, I follow the chain of hands. Who held the text? Who changed it? Who decided what you'd never read? Subscribe if you want the rest. I'm Daniel Voss, the Black Parchment. I spent 4 months on this passage because I didn't trust my own reading of it. I showed it to 2 people who work in biblical Semitic languages. One told me I was over-reading. The other one stopped answering my emails. If you'd like to get your personal readings, head over to theblackstore.co. All you need is your birthday. It tells you everything about your personal life. We limited the run to 300 copies, and there are only a few left. So grab yours before they're gone. Link in the description or scan this QR code. The chapter is 69. It sits inside the parables section of 1 Enoch, chapters 37 through 71, and most commentators skim it. Nickelsburg's 2001 Hermeneia commentary gives it under 4 pages. VanderKam mentions it in passing. It reads like a roster. Angel names, functions, jurisdictions. But something shifts, starting around verse 8. The text begins listing the secrets the fallen watchers gave to humans. Not vague sins, specific transfers. One angel taught metallurgy, another taught cosmetics, another taught weapon casting. That's the standard Watcher catalogue. You can find a version of it in chapter 8. Then the text gets to a name most translations render as Kazdeja. And what Kazdeja taught is where the entire passage goes sideways. R.H. Charles, 1906, renders it as the smiting of the embryo in the womb and the bite of the serpent. Michael Knibb at Oxford gives it similarly. Most readers skim past. Sounds like a reference to miscarriage, maybe poison. Grim, but not unusual for a list of angelic crimes. The problem is the GEEs. The word Charles translates as embryo is closer to the forming thing within the sealed place. And the verb he renders as smiting carries a secondary sense in classical ge'ez that none of the major English editions use. It doesn't only mean to strike, it carries a meaning closer to setting hard, making calcium, making permanent. The full phrase, transliterated from the ge'ez, reads something close to Wayeeti mestir zayed gabar westere es zate haweka be mesa. One of the translators who worked on the 1983 edition footnoted this line as the hidden organ that hardens within the head, which was sealed in the middle. The footnote was cut before publication. What survived into print was Charles's reading, the smiting of the embryo in the womb. Those aren't the same sentence. One is about reproduction. The other is about anatomy. A small organ inside the skull that was hardened, sealed, made permanent by something that was given or taught or done. I need to stop here for a minute because what comes next doesn't land unless you understand how the Book of Enoch talks about seeing. In the Aramaic fragments recovered from Cave 4 at Qumran, the verb eitzisech means ordinary sight. You see a wall, you see the sky, eyes open, world there. But there's a second construction, one that Nickelsburg flags in his 2001 commentary and VanderKam addressed in a 1995 paper on vision report formulas. It gets translated as, "My eyes were opened," or "I was made to see." In the original language, this isn't metaphor. The grammar marks it as a state change. Something closed is now open. A faculty that was off is now on. The verb form is different, a different conjugation for a different kind of seeing. This distinction runs through the first 36 chapters without exception. Every time Enoch enters a visionary state, the text uses this second form. Every time he returns to normal perception, the language reverts. The shift is consistent across 17 separate vision reports. Nickelsburg counted them. 17 times the text flips the same switch. What the grammar is describing is not divine inspiration in any theological sense. It's a perceptual mode, an organ that activates and deactivates. And the consistency of the language across chapters composed, according to Milik's dating of the Aramaic fragments, over a span of at least 100 years, means this isn't one writer's personal metaphor. It's a shared technical vocabulary. Multiple scribes use the same construction the same way. I don't know who built that system. I've looked. The grammar predates the earliest fragments we have. The system was already in place by the time someone copied 4Q201. So it's older than the oldest physical copy of Enoch that exists, which is already 3rd century BC. Whatever this perceptual vocabulary was, it was established before anyone thought to write it down on the scroll we found. Doesn't matter, it's there. And nobody put 17 instances of the same grammatical switch into a text by accident. Now take that and go back to chapter 69. The passage says, Kasdeja taught humans the hidden hardening within the head. Read that with the vision language system I just laid out, and the sentence doesn't need interpretation. It needs anatomy. The text is saying there's an organ inside the skull responsible for a second mode of perception, and one of the fallen watchers taught humans how to calcify it. The pineal gland sits at the geometric center of the brain. It's the only unpaired gland in the central nervous system, which is a strange thing for a gland to be. Everything else comes in pairs. This one doesn't. It produces melatonin, which governs sleep cycles. It produces trace amounts of DMT, the most powerful perceptual compound the human body is known to generate, and it calcifies. Calcium phosphate builds up starting before puberty and increases throughout adult life. In adults over 50, the gland is often significantly IT, in some cases almost entirely. The author of chapter 69 had no microscope. He had no concept of the endocrine system. He had no word for calcium phosphate. He described a hidden organ inside the head, used the verb to make hard, placed it in a list of modifications made to the human body by beings who wanted to reduce what humans could perceive, and filed it between weapon-making and oath-breaking like it was a line item. He couldn't have known this. That's the sentence I keep coming back to. Not, he shouldn't have. He couldn't have. If you've read the Charles translation and this doesn't match what you remember, tell me in the comments. I've seen 3 different printings with different verse numbering, and 2 of them handle the Kasdeya section differently. I want to know which one you have. There's a second layer, and it's worse. Chapter 8 covers the same territory, same fallen watchers, same teachings. But chapter 8 doesn't mention Kasdeja. He shows up in chapter 69 and nowhere else in the entire corpus. The teachings in chapter 8 run through weapons, cosmetics, astrology. The teachings in chapter 69 include all of those and then add a category that appears nowhere else. Kasdeja's speciality, the body itself. What was altered inside it? Nickelsburg argues in the Hermeneia commentary that chapter 69 draws from an older, longer watcher list. His position is that chapter 8 is the compressed version, the editorial cut. Someone trimmed the roster, and Kasdeja was the one who didn't survive. The angel whose crime was teaching humanity how to shut down a perceptual organ in the brain is the one who got edited out of the shorter list. Weapons survived. Cosmetics survived. The one entry that describes a permanent change made to the human body was removed. I spent a weekend trying to find a manuscript tradition where Kasdeja appears in chapter 8. There are 49 known Ge'ez manuscripts of 1st Enoch, catalogued across the Bibliothèque Nationale, the British Library, the Bodleian, and several collections in Addis Ababa. I couldn't access most of them remotely. The British Library's catalogue listed one with marginal annotations on chapter 8 that might be relevant. The digitized version cuts off at chapter 6. I emailed about it. No response. That was in February. Whoever wrote chapter 69 wasn't composing poetry. The chapter is organized like a filing system. Names, then jurisdictions, then consequences. It reads the way someone writes when they believe they won't be taken seriously, but they're putting it on paper anyway, because the information matters more than the reaction. No rhetoric, no drama, just the data. One thing I noticed on my 4th time through the chapter: the verse about the hardening sits between a teaching on weapons and a teaching on oath-breaking. It doesn't get its own paragraph. It doesn't get emphasis. It's listed the way you'd list a supply order, as if the writer considered it ordinary, or as if he considered it so obvious that explaining it would have been strange. I still don't know which of those is more unsettling. Now let me give you the science side, because the convergence is where this gets difficult to dismiss. Jennifer Luke, University of Surrey, published a study in 2001 measuring fluoride accumulation in human pineal glands. She used cadaveric tissue. The gland, she found, concentrates fluoride at levels higher than any other soft tissue in the human body. In some specimens, the fluoride concentration in the pineal exceeded that of bone. Her study was the first to document this. Rick Strassman, University of New Mexico, had been running clinical DMT trials through the 1990s. He administered DMT intravenously to volunteers and recorded the results. Every subject reported a perceptual shift they described as more real than waking life, not hallucination. something closer to an upgrade. Strassman published the findings in his 2001 book and proposed that the pineal gland produces DMT endogenously, and that the compound is involved in states of expanded perception, including near-death experiences and certain stages of sleep. The hypothesis was unproven at the time. Then, the Michigan study confirmed endogenous DMT production in living mammals in 2013. Stack those together: a gland that produces a perceptual compound, a gland that starts hardening before puberty, a gland that concentrates an environmental toxin at rates suggesting it was never designed to encounter that toxin, and a 2,200-year-old text that says a non-human being taught humans how to make that exact gland go hard. Every adult watching this has had the experience. You remember what the world looked like when you were 9, maybe 10. The colors were sharper. Time didn't move the same way. You assumed that was nostalgia or brain development or just the difference between being a kid and being grown. Maybe it was the gland. If anyone watching this has had imaging done, a CT or MRI where the pineal was visible, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments what they said about it, if they said anything at all. Most radiologists don't mention it unless you ask. Chapter 69 doesn't stop at the hardening. That's the part most people would stop at. The text doesn't. Starting around verse 14, the chapter moves from the list of Watcher teachings to something else entirely. The oath. The name of the oath. The text calls it beaker, and it describes the oath as a mechanism, not a prayer. Enoch writes that when the name is spoken under specific conditions, the hidden things within the sealed places are made to open. The verb form is the same one used in the vision reports, the same grammatical switch Nickelsburg catalogued 17 times across the first 36 chapters. The sealed thing inside the head opens. The word baker in the Ge'ez shares a root with a verb meaning to crack or to split open. It's not an invocation in any devotional sense. The text treats it as a force applied to something physical that was closed. Pressure on a seal. Verse 25 stopped me cold. The text says, and I'm compressing because Ge'ez syntax runs roughly twice the length of English. When the sealed organ is opened, the eyes see what the watchers see. The gates of the sun become visible. The operators become visible. And the one who sees cannot return to the former sight. That last clause, cannot return. The text treats this as permanent. Once the gland reactivates, ordinary perception is gone. The person doesn't go back to seeing surfaces. They see, as the rest of the parables describe it, the system behind the surfaces. Chapters 41 through 44 detail what the opened eyes perceive. Storehouses of wind, chambers where lightning is weighed before it's released, a holding place where rain waits. The language reads like someone walking through infrastructure, taking notes. Not heaven, not paradise, a utility grid. And chapter 69 says the organ that lets you see it was deliberately switched off by someone who didn't want you looking at the wiring. The parables section of 1st Enoch was never found at Qumran. Milik noted this in 1976. Every other section of 1st Enoch turned up in the cave 4 fragments: Watchers, Astronomical Book, Dream Visions, the Epistle. All represented. The parables were not. They survive only in the Ethiopian Ge'ez manuscripts. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church kept them. Nobody else did. Why the parables are absent from Qumran is still an open question. VanderKam has argued it's a composition date issue, that the parables were written after the Qumran community stopped copying. Gabriele Boccaccini, at the 4th Enoch seminar in 2007, argued something similar. That's a reasonable position, and I don't have the manuscript evidence to contradict it. But chapter 69 is in the parables, and chapter 69 contains the most specific passage in the entire Enochic corpus. The chapter that describes a gland in the human brain being permanently calcified was preserved by exactly one tradition, on a different continent, in a language almost nobody in medieval Europe could read. For roughly 1500 years. I follow chains. This chain has a gap in it right where the most specific chapter should be. There are two honest ways to read what I've just walked you through. First, the ge'ez in chapter 69 is ambiguous enough that you can project modern anatomy onto it if you want to. Ancient writers talked about heads and hidden things constantly. The pineal connection is modern pattern matching. The calcification language is a stretch of the verb. The convergence with Strassman's research is coincidence layered on coincidence. A lot of good scholars would say exactly this, and they wouldn't be lazy for saying it. Second, the text identifies a specific organ by location and function. It uses a verb that means to harden, to calcite, to make permanent. It places this in a list of deliberate modifications made to the human body by non-human beings. It describes a reversal mechanism using the same verb grammar that marks perceptual mode change 17 times across the rest of the book. The organ is real. The calcification is real. The compound it produces is the most powerful perceptual agent the human body makes. And the text described all of this 22 centuries before any of it was measured in a lab. One of those reads is comfortable. The other means you've been running on equipment that was deliberately downgraded before you were old enough to know what you lost. And the repair manual was written in a book that got pulled from your Bible 16 centuries ago. I don't tell you which one to hold. I hand you the text and the chain of hands that brought it here. Tell me in the comments which reading you walked away with. I read every one of them. Daniel Voss, I'm still pulling the thread.